After a night with his mistress, he found his pregnant wife's diamond earrings and a goodbye note. 3:47 am. The return. The key turned in the lock with the careful precision of a guilty man. Elliot Parker, 36, slipped through the front door of their San Francisco Victorian home, his Italian leather shoes silent against the hardwood floor. The scent of another woman's perfume, something floral and expensive, clung to his navy dress shirt like evidence he couldn't wash away. He'd spent the evening at the Fairmont Hotel with Holly James, his 28-year-old secret. 3 months of stolen moments, expensive dinners, and lies that rolled off his tongue easier each time. Tonight had been different, though. Holly had been more demanding, talking about taking things to the next level, while her manicured fingers traced patterns on his chest. "Your wife doesn't need to know everything about your life," she had whispered, her voice honey-sweet but calculating. "Some things are just ours." Now, standing in his darkened living room, Elliot felt the familiar cocktail of guilt and excitement that had become his drug of choice. The house was silent. Marilyn was probably asleep, her growing belly making comfortable positions harder to find these days. 6 months pregnant. The thought should have filled him with joy, but lately, it only reminded him of everything he felt he was losing. His freedom, his youth, his options. The dining room discovery. As he moved toward the stairs, something caught his eye. The dining room table was set for 2. White china plates sat untouched, accompanied by the good silverware they only used for anniversaries. 2 tall candles had burned down to waxy stubs, their flames long since extinguished. A bottle of sparkling cider, the kind Marilyn had been drinking instead of wine, sat unopened beside a small, wrapped gift. Elliot's stomach clenched. Had he forgotten something? Their anniversary wasn't until next month. Her birthday had passed in February. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his calendar with trembling fingers. Nothing. No reminder. No special date marked in red. Then he saw the note propped against the cider bottle, written in Marilyn's careful handwriting. "I made your favorite pasta. I wanted to tell you something special about the baby, but I guess work ran late again. Tomorrow? M." The guilt hit him like a physical blow. While his pregnant wife had been setting candles and preparing his favorite meal, he'd been in a hotel room with another woman, making plans that didn't include the family he was supposed to be building. 4:12 a.m. The bedroom revelation. Elliot climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. He'd shower quickly, slip into bed, and deal with his guilt in the morning. He'd become an expert at compartmentalizing, filing away his betrayal in a mental box marked, "handled later." But when he pushed open their bedroom door, his world tilted off its axis. On Marilyn's side of the bed, arranged with deliberate care, lay her diamond earrings, the ones he'd given her for their first anniversary 3 years ago, when they were still dreaming about the future instead of running from it. The stones caught the moonlight streaming through their curtains, winking at him like tiny accusations. Beside the earrings sat a cream-colored envelope with his name written across it in the same careful script he'd seen downstairs. His hands shook as he picked it up. The paper felt expensive, substantial, like Marilyn had chosen it specifically for this moment. When he opened it, her wedding ring fell out, clattering onto the hardwood floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire house. The letter was short. 3 sentences that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "I loved you from the moment I chose you. You betrayed me the moment I chose to give you a family. I won't carry this marriage anymore. Only our baby. Marilyn." The empty closet. Elliot's legs gave out. He sank onto the bed, the letter crumpling in his grip as the reality crashed over him. This wasn't a fight they could work through over coffee and apologies. This wasn't Marilyn being dramatic about his late nights at the office. This was over. He stumbled to her closet, yanking open the doors with desperate hope that maybe, this was just her way of making a point. But the space was hollow, echoing. Her clothes were gone. Her shoes, her jewelry box, the small collection of books she kept on the dresser. Even her pillow was missing. In the bathroom, her toothbrush was gone. Her shampoo, her makeup, the prenatal vitamins she'd been taking religiously since the day they found out about the baby. It was as if Marilyn Parker had simply evaporated, leaving behind only the scent of her perfume and the weight of her absence. 4:31 a.m. The phone that wouldn't answer. Elliot's fingers flew across his phone screen, calling her number again and again. Each ring felt like a countdown to the end of everything he'd taken for granted. The calls went straight to voicemail, her voice bright and happy in the recording. A ghost of the woman who had once promised to love him forever. "Hey, it's Marilyn. Leave a message and I'll get back to you soon. But she wouldn't get back to him. Not soon. Maybe not ever. As dawn broke over San Francisco, painting their bedroom in shades of gold and regret, Elliot Parker finally understood what he had lost. Not just his wife, not just his marriage, but the future they had planned together. The family dinners, the first steps, the Christmas mornings, the life he had thrown away for 3 months of cheap thrills with a woman who saw him as nothing more than entertainment. The diamond earrings still lay on the bed, sparkling in the morning light like tears he was finally ready to cry. 7:15 a.m., frantic search. Elliot hadn't slept. He'd spent the last 3 hours tearing through every room in their house like a man possessed, searching for some clue about where Marilyn had gone. Her passport was missing from the desk drawer. Her favorite coffee mug, the one with the chipped handle she refused to throw away, was gone from the kitchen. But it was the empty space in their shared closet that kept drawing him back. The wooden hangers hung naked, mocking him with their uniformity. Even her maternity clothes were gone, the special dresses she'd bought with such excitement just 2 months ago. His phone buzzed. For a heart-stopping moment he thought it might be her. Instead, Holly's name flashed across the screen, accompanied by a text that made his stomach turn. "Last night was amazing. When can I see you again?" The casualness of it, the complete disconnect from his current reality, hit him like a slap. While his world was collapsing, Holly was already planning their next encounter. The desperate calls Elliot scrolled through his contacts, his thumb hovering over numbers he hadn't called in months. Marilyn's sister, Elena. Her best friend from college, Natalie. Her mother, Dorothy. He started with Elena, who lived across town in the Mission District. "Elena, it's Elliot. Is Marilyn with you?" The pause was telling. When Elena finally spoke, her voice was ice cold. "No, Elliot. She's not here. Do you know where she is? Please, I need to—" "What you need to do," Elena interrupted, "is think about why she left in the first place." The line went dead. Natalie was next. The phone rang once before going to voicemail, which told him everything he needed to know. She was screening his calls. That left Dorothy. 7:42 a.m., the mother-in-law's verdict. Dorothy Brennan had never particularly liked Elliot. She'd been polite during the wedding planning, cordial at family dinners, but he'd always sensed her reservation, as if she could see something in him that Marilyn couldn't, or wouldn't. Now calling her felt like walking into a courtroom for sentencing. "Mrs. Brennan, it's Elliot. I know it's early, but she's safe." Dorothy's voice was crisp, matter of fact. "That's all you need to know. Please, I just want to talk to her. There's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Dorothy's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you're calling it?" Elliot's throat tightened. "How much do you know?" "I know enough. I know my daughter spent last night crying until she made herself sick. I know she's carrying your child and deserves better than whatever game you've been playing. I never meant for this to happen. I can fix this, Mrs. Brennan. Just let me talk to her." "No, Elliot. You can't fix this. Some things once broken stay broken." The line went dead, leaving Elliot staring at his phone screen as if it might offer some miracle solution. 8:23 a.m., the unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang just as Elliot was considering calling in sick to work. He'd been at his marketing firm for 8 years, working his way up to senior account manager. The thought of sitting through client presentations and budget meetings while his life imploded felt impossible. Through the peephole, he saw Holly standing on his front porch looking perfectly put together in a cream-colored blazer and designer jeans. Her red hair was styled in soft waves, and she carried a paper bag that probably contained expensive coffee and pastries. His first instinct was to pretend he wasn't home, but Holly had seen his car in the driveway. She knew he was inside. "Surprise," she said when he opened the door, her smile bright and completely oblivious. "I brought breakfast. I thought we could spend the morning together since you don't have to sneak around anymore." The words hit him like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" Holly stepped past him into the house, her heels clicking confidently on the hardwood. "Well, with Marilyn gone to her mother's, probably just being dramatic about the whole thing, we finally have some privacy." "How did you know she went to her mother's?" Holly shrugged, setting the pastry bag on the kitchen counter. "I may have driven by Dorothy's house this morning. I saw Marilyn's car in the driveway." She turned to face him, her expression shifting slightly as she took in his appearance. "Elliot, you look terrible. Did you sleep at all?" The reality check. "She left me, Holly. She's not coming back." Holly's perfectly applied lipstick curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course she is. Pregnant women are emotional. She'll cool off in a day or two, and then you can apologize with some expensive jewelry and flowers. They always come back. The callousness in her voice, the casual way she discussed his wife's pain, made something snap inside Elliot. For the first time since this affair began, he saw Holly clearly, not as an escape or an adventure, but as what she really was. A woman who had knowingly helped him destroy his marriage without a second thought. This isn't a temporary tantrum, Holly. She knows. About us. About everything. Holly's confidence flickered for just a moment before reasserting itself. So? You weren't happy anyway. That's why you came to me in the first place. I have a baby coming, and you can still have that baby. Joint custody, weekend visits. Lots of divorced fathers make it work. Holly moved closer, placing her hands on his chest in a gesture that had once thrilled him and now made his skin crawl. Think about it, Elliot. No more sneaking around. No more guilt. Just us. 9:15 a.m. The neighbor's witness. Through the kitchen window, Elliot could see Mrs. O'Brien, Dorothy's neighbor who lived next door, watering her front garden. She was one of those neighborhood fixtures who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing her opinions. Holly followed his gaze and waved cheerfully at the older woman, as if this were perfectly normal, as if she belonged here. Mrs. O'Brien's expression was pure disapproval. She'd obviously seen Holly arrive and drawn her own conclusions about what was happening. By noon, the entire neighborhood would know that Elliot Parker's pregnant wife had moved out and his girlfriend had moved in. Holly, you need to leave. What? She turned back to him, genuinely surprised. Why? Because this is insane. Because my wife left me 12 hours ago and you're acting like it's cause for celebration. Because I need time to think. Holly's mask finally slipped, revealing something harder underneath. Time to think about what exactly? Whether you want to crawl back to a woman who doesn't understand you, or move forward with someone who does. I want to save my marriage. Your marriage was already over, Elliot. I just helped you realize it. The ultimatum. Holly picked up her purse, her movements sharp with irritation. Fine. Take your time. Wallow in your guilt. But don't expect me to wait around indefinitely while you figure out what you want. She paused at the front door, her hand on the handle. You know what the difference is between me and Marilyn? She makes you feel guilty for being human. I accept you as you are. After she left, Elliot sank onto his couch and stared at the breakfast she'd brought. Artisanal croissants and gourmet coffee that probably cost more than he usually spent on groceries in a week. Everything Holly had said was wrong, but part of him had believed it for 3 months. That he deserved this. That his happiness mattered more than his commitments. That love was supposed to be easy, and when it got hard, it meant you were with the wrong person. Now, sitting in a house that felt like a mausoleum of his former life, Elliot finally understood the difference between happiness and joy. Happiness was fleeting. A good meal. A compliment. A moment of pleasure. Joy was deeper. Joy was coming home to someone who loved you enough to set candles on the table even when you didn't deserve it. He'd traded joy for happiness, and now he had neither. 10:30 a.m. Dorothy's kitchen. 23 miles across town, Marilyn sat at her mother's kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of chamomile tea that had long since gone cold. The morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting soft patterns across the worn wooden surface where she'd done homework as a child, where she'd planned her wedding 3 years ago, where she now planned her divorce. Dorothy Brennan moved quietly around the kitchen, making toast she knew her daughter wouldn't eat, keeping busy to avoid the helpless feeling that came with watching your child's heart break in real time. The attorney can see you this afternoon, Dorothy said gently, setting a plate of buttered toast beside Marilyn's untouched tea. Rebecca Lawson. She handled the O'Brien divorce last year. Clean, professional, no unnecessary drama. Marilyn nodded absently, one hand resting on her rounded belly where the baby was active this morning, as if sensing her mother's stress. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her child was the only thing keeping her grounded while her world fell apart around her. I keep thinking about the dinner, Marilyn said suddenly. I spent 2 hours making his favorite carbonara. I bought sparkling cider so I could toast with him. I wrapped the ultrasound photos in tissue paper like they were precious gifts. Dorothy sat down across from her daughter, her own coffee mug cradled in weathered hands that had comforted Marilyn through childhood nightmares, teenage heartbreaks, and now this, the worst betrayal of all. What were you going to tell him about the baby? For the first time all morning, Marilyn's face softened. It's a girl. I found out yesterday at my appointment. I wanted to surprise him, maybe start talking about names, about the nursery. Her voice caught. I was so excited to share it with him. 11:15 a.m. The phone that kept ringing. Marilyn's phone had been buzzing constantly since dawn. 17 missed calls from Elliot. 8 voicemails she had no intention of listening to. Dozens of text messages that grew increasingly desperate as the morning progressed. Please call me back. We need to talk. I know you're angry, but we can work through this. Think about our baby. It was the last message that made her finally turn the phone face down. How dare he invoke their daughter, the baby he'd betrayed before she was even born, as leverage for his guilt. He has some nerve, Dorothy muttered, having seen the constant notifications, using that child as emotional blackmail. The baby's the only reason I'm not completely destroyed, Marilyn said quietly. She needs me to be strong. She needs me to make better choices than staying with a man who thinks commitment is optional. 11:45 a.m. The neighbor's visit. Mrs. O'Brien knocked on Dorothy's front door just before noon, carrying a casserole dish and wearing an expression that spelled trouble. Agnes O'Brien had lived on Maple Street for 42 years and had appointed herself the neighborhood's unofficial moral authority. Dorothy, dear, I hope you don't mind me stopping by, she said, though her tone suggested she'd planned to stop by regardless of whether it was minded. I wanted to check on Marilyn and also, she paused, clearly relishing her role as bearer of significant news. I thought you should know what I witnessed this morning. Dorothy invited her in, though every maternal instinct told her this conversation would only make things worse. That woman, Mrs. O'Brien continued, settling into the living room chair closest to Marilyn, the red-headed one I've seen coming and going from Elliot's house these past few weeks. She showed up this morning bold as brass, carrying breakfast like she owned the place. Marilyn's teacup rattled against its saucer. She was at my house, acting like the lady of the manor, Mrs. O'Brien confirmed with obvious disapproval, waving at me like we were old friends, strutting around in those expensive clothes. No shame whatsoever. Dorothy placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Agnes, maybe this isn't the time. Oh, but there's more. Mrs. O'Brien pressed on, clearly enjoying her captive audience. I saw them through the kitchen window. That woman had her hands all over him, acting like his wife leaving was cause for celebration. Shameless. Absolutely shameless. The breaking point. Marilyn stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The blood had drained from her face, making her freckles stand out like scattered stars. She was celebrating, Marilyn whispered, the words barely audible. While I was here crying over ultrasound photos, she was celebrating. Honey, sit down, Dorothy urged, alarmed by her daughter's pallor. Think about the baby. But Marilyn was beyond sitting down, beyond thinking about anything except the image of Holly James touching her husband in her kitchen, in the house where Marilyn had planned to raise their daughter. I need air, she said, moving toward the front door with unsteady steps. Marilyn, wait. But she was already outside, standing on her mother's front porch, gripping the railing as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of burning leaves from somewhere down the street, the smell of things ending, of seasons changing whether you were ready or not. 12:20 p.m. The strength. She didn't know. She had Dorothy found her daughter 10 minutes later, still standing on the porch but no longer gripping the railing. Her posture had changed, straightened. The tears had stopped. I'm not going to let her win, Marilyn said without turning around. I'm not going to let either of them turn me into a victim who hides in her mother's house feeling sorry for herself. What are you thinking? Marilyn turned to face her mother, and Dorothy was struck by how much her daughter looked like herself at that age. Determined, fierce, unbreakable when pushed too far. I'm thinking about my daughter, about the woman I want her to see when she looks at her mother. Not someone who begged a cheating husband to come back, not someone who competed with his mistress for scraps of his attention. Marilyn's hand moved to her belly, protective and sure. I want her to see someone who chose herself, someone who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less. Dorothy felt tears prick her eyes. This was the daughter she'd raised, the girl who'd stood up to schoolyard bullies, who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for college, who'd never backed down from a challenge in her life. So what's the plan? Marilyn's smile was small but genuine, the first real smile Dorothy had seen from her since she'd arrived in tears the night before. First, I'm keeping my appointment with the attorney. Then I'm going to eat something because this baby needs nutrition, not just chamomile tea and heartbreak. And then, she paused, looking down the street toward her old neighborhood. toward the life she was leaving behind. Then I'm going to show them both what it looks like when someone refuses to be destroyed. Mrs. O'Brien, who had been lingering in the doorway, nodded approvingly. That's the spirit, dear. Dignity is the best revenge. For the first time since finding those earrings on her bed, Marilyn felt like she might actually survive this. More than survive. She might even thrive. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, as if agreeing with her mother's newfound resolve. 2:30 p.m. Lawson and Associates. The law office of Rebecca Lawson occupied the third floor of a restored Victorian building in downtown San Francisco, its tall windows offering a view of the bay that Marilyn barely noticed as she sat across from the attorney who would help her reclaim her life. Rebecca Lawson was younger than Marilyn had expected, maybe 35, with short auburn hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen every variation of marital betrayal and wasn't easily shocked. I want to be clear about something from the start, Rebecca said, reviewing the intake forms Marilyn had filled out. California is a no-fault divorce state. Your husband's infidelity, while morally reprehensible, won't significantly impact property division or spousal support. Marilyn nodded, her hands folded protectively over her belly. I understand. This isn't about punishment, it's about protection. Good. That's the healthiest approach. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. Now let's talk about what we can protect. You're 6 months pregnant, you've been married 3 years, and you work part-time as a graphic designer. Is that correct? Yes. I scaled back when we started trying for a baby. Elliot makes good money at his marketing firm, enough to support us both. Marilyn's voice caught slightly. Or so I thought. Rebecca made notes on her legal pad. The house? Joint ownership, but most of the down payment came from his savings. Marilyn had been dreading this part. The itemization of their life together, reduced to assets and debts. I contributed about a third. And you want to keep the baby in the Bay Area? Yes. My mother is here, my support system. I don't want to disrupt that, especially not now. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. Marilyn, I have to ask, have you considered whether reconciliation might be possible? I deal with a lot of marriages in crisis, and sometimes the shock of separation can... No. The word came out harder than Marilyn intended. You didn't see what I saw this morning. His mistress was in my kitchen, acting like she belonged there, celebrating the fact that I'd left. She took a shaky breath. I won't compete for my own husband. I won't teach my daughter that love means accepting betrayal. 3:15 p.m. Elliot's office. Crisis. Across town, Elliot sat in his corner office at Brennan Marketing Group, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. He'd managed to make it through exactly one client meeting before his concentration completely collapsed. The presentation about brand loyalty and customer retention felt like a cosmic joke. He couldn't even maintain loyalty in his own marriage. His assistant, Jennifer, knocked on his glass door. Elliot? The Morrison account called. They want to reschedule tomorrow's presentation. Fine, whatever. He didn't look up from his screen, where Marilyn's last text message glowed like an accusation. Please don't contact me anymore. My attorney will be in touch. Attorney. The word hit him like a physical blow every time he read it. Also, Jennifer continued hesitantly, your wife called earlier. Well, not your wife, the other woman, Holly James. She seemed upset that you weren't taking her calls. Elliot's head snapped up. Holly called the office? 3 times. She said it was urgent and that you weren't answering your personal phone. The humiliation was complete. Not only had his marriage imploded, but now his affair was becoming office gossip. Jennifer was trying to be professional, but he could see the curiosity in her eyes, the way she was processing this information. If she calls again, tell her I'm unavailable. For how long? Indefinitely. 4:45 p.m. The confrontation. Elliot was packing up his laptop when Holly appeared in his office doorway, having somehow talked her way past building security. She looked less polished than usual, her hair slightly disheveled, her makeup touched up but not quite hiding the frustration in her eyes. We need to talk, she said, closing his office door behind her with a deliberate click. Not here, Holly. This is my workplace. Then where? You won't answer my calls, you won't answer your door. What am I supposed to think? Elliot looked around his office, acutely aware that his colleagues could see them through the glass walls. Sarah from accounting was pretending to review files while obviously eavesdropping. Marcus from creative kept glancing their way. I think, he said quietly, that maybe we both need to take a step back and figure out what we really want. Holly's laugh was sharp, bitter. What we want. I know what I want, Elliot. The question is whether you have the courage to admit what you want. My wife is pregnant. She's filing for divorce. I think I have bigger concerns right now than what I want. Your wife left you. Holly's voice rose, causing several heads to turn their way. She made her choice. Stop acting like you're the villain here. Aren't I? The words came out before he could stop them. Aren't we both villains? She trusted me, Holly. She loved me. And I threw it away for what? For this? He gestured between them, and Holly flinched as if he'd slapped her. 4 hours p.m., the public unraveling. Don't you dare, Holly said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Don't you dare turn me into the problem. You came to me, remember? You're the one who said your marriage was already over. You're the one who pursued me. The office had gone quiet around them. Even the pretense of work had stopped as Elliot's colleagues watched the drama unfold through the glass walls of his office. You're right, Elliot said, his voice hollow. I did pursue you. I did say my marriage was over. I was wrong about everything. Holly's face went white. So that's it? You're going to crawl back to a woman who doesn't even want you anymore, just so you can feel like the good guy? I'm not the good guy, Holly. That's the point. There is no good guy in this situation. But there's a baby coming who deserves better than parents who destroyed each other. And what about me? Holly's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. What about what I deserve? I fell in love with you, Elliot. I changed my entire life for you. I turned down other opportunities because I thought we had a future. The raw pain in her voice made Elliot look at her, really look at her. For the first time in months, he saw past the perfectly applied makeup and designer clothes to the woman underneath, and realized with startling clarity that he had never actually seen her before. He'd been so caught up in the excitement of the forbidden that he'd never bothered to discover who Holly James really was. And now, watching her vulnerabilities spill out in his office like blood from a wound, he realized the terrible truth. He didn't love her. He wasn't even sure he liked her. She had been an escape, a fantasy, a way to avoid the real work of marriage. But she had been something else too, a real person with real feelings, who had believed his promises and rearranged her life around his lies. 4:15 p.m. The price of truth. Holly, he said gently, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I made you promises I couldn't keep. I'm sorry I let you believe this could work. I'm sorry I dragged you into this mess. Don't, she said, tears threatening her carefully applied mascara. Don't apologize to me like I'm some victim. We both knew what this was. Did we? Because I'm not sure I knew anything. I was just running away from responsibility, from growing up, from being the man my wife needed me to be. Holly straightened her blazer, rebuilding her composure piece by piece. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, cold. You know what, Elliot? You're right. You're not the good guy. You're not even the bad guy. You're just weak. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Marilyn's better off without you, and so am I. After she left, Elliot sat alone in his glass office, surrounded by the wreckage of his professional reputation and the whispered conversations of his colleagues. He pulled out his phone and stared at Marilyn's contact information. The photo of her laughing at their wedding, the heart emoji next to her name, the history of 1,000 loving text messages that now felt like artifacts from someone else's life. He typed and deleted a dozen messages before finally settling on the simplest truth. I'm sorry. I love you. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know. He hit send before he could change his mind, then watched as the message was delivered but never read. Outside his office window, the sun was beginning to set over San Francisco Bay, painting the sky in shades of gold and regret. 6:45 p.m. The support group. Marilyn hadn't planned to attend the pregnancy support group at St. Mary's Community Center. She'd signed up weeks ago when she and Elliot were still pretending everything was perfect, when she thought she'd need advice about nursery themes and birthing plans, not how to navigate divorce while 6 months pregnant. But Dorothy had gently insisted, and Marilyn found herself sitting in a circle of folding chairs with 7 other women in various stages of pregnancy, listening to facilitator Dr. Linda Reeves explain the evening's topic, building your village. Tonight we're talking about support systems, Dr. Reeves said, her voice warm and professional, especially for those of you facing unexpected challenges during your pregnancy. Marilyn shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Had her mother called ahead? Did everyone here know she was the woman whose husband had been cheating while she planned baby names? I'd like each of you to share one thing that's given you strength this week, Dr. Reeves continued. Remember, this is a judgment-free space. The sharing began with typical concerns: morning sickness, work stress, anxiety about labor. When it reached Marilyn, she almost passed, but something about the genuine concern in these strangers' eyes made her speak. "I left my husband 3 days ago," she said quietly. "I'm starting over at 32, 6 months pregnant, and I'm terrified. But also," she paused, surprised by the words that came next. "Also kind of excited. Like maybe this is my chance to build the life I actually want. Not just the one I thought I was supposed to want." 7:30 p.m. The coffee shop connection. After the meeting, a woman named Sophia approached Marilyn in the parking lot. She was maybe 28, with kind eyes and a 7-month pregnant belly that she carried with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. "I don't want to overstep," Sophia said, "but I heard what you shared tonight and I wanted you to know. You're stronger than you think you are." Marilyn smiled for what felt like the first time in days. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I've been where you are. Different circumstances, but..." Sophia gestured to the coffee shop next to the community center. "You have time for coffee?" "Decaf, obviously." Over steaming mugs of chamomile tea and hot chocolate, Sophia told her story. Her ex-husband hadn't cheated. He'd simply announced when she was 4 months pregnant with their first child that fatherhood wasn't for him, and moved to Portland without leaving a forwarding address. "I spent weeks convinced I was ruined," Sophia said. "Single mom, no father in the picture, people looking at me with pity. But you know what I discovered? Pity is just other people's fear that the same thing could happen to them." Marilyn found herself leaning forward, hungry for this perspective. "How did you get past it?" "I stopped waiting for someone to rescue me and started rescuing myself. Applied for better jobs, found an apartment I loved, built a support network of people who actually showed up when they said they would." Sophia smiled. "My daughter is 3 now, and she's never known a world where her mom wasn't capable of handling anything." 8:15 p.m. The unexpected call. Marilyn was driving home from the coffee shop when her phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. Holly James's name appeared on the dashboard display, and Marilyn's first instinct was to decline the call. But something, curiosity maybe, or a desire to finally face her husband's mistress directly, made her answer. "Hello, Marilyn." Holly's voice was different than Marilyn had imagined. Softer, more vulnerable. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I was hoping, could we meet? Just for coffee. Just to talk." Marilyn pulled into a parking space outside a pharmacy, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "Why would I want to do that?" "Because we were both lied to," Holly said simply. "And because I think we both deserve better than the story Elliot is trying to tell about what happened." The honesty in Holly's voice caught Marilyn off guard. This wasn't the predatory homewrecker she'd imagined, or the calculating seductress Mrs. O'Brien had described. This sounded like a woman who was also trying to make sense of the wreckage. "I don't know if that's a good idea," Marilyn said carefully. "I understand, but if you change your mind, I'll be at the Starbucks on Union Street tomorrow at 11. I'll wait for an hour." Holly paused. "Marilyn, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for being with him. I'm not going to pretend I didn't want that. But I'm sorry you got hurt. You didn't deserve that." The line went dead, leaving Marilyn staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror, wondering if she'd just heard genuine remorse or the most sophisticated manipulation yet. 9:30 p.m. Dorothy's kitchen wisdom. Back at her mother's house, Marilyn found Dorothy in the kitchen, preparing her famous lavender cookies, the same recipe she'd made when Marilyn was a child and needed comfort. "How is the support group?" Dorothy asked, not looking up from the cookie dough. "Helpful. I met someone who's been through something similar." Marilyn settled at the kitchen table, watching her mother work. "Mom, can I ask you something? How did you know Dad was the right person to marry?" Dorothy's hands stilled on the rolling pin. She'd been widowed for 8 years, and she still wore her wedding ring, not from inability to move on, but as a reminder of what real partnership looked like. "I knew because he made me want to be better without making me feel like I wasn't already enough," Dorothy said finally. "He challenged me to grow, but he loved me exactly as I was. And when things got hard, and they did get hard, we faced them together, not by running to other people." Marilyn felt tears threaten again. "I thought Elliot and I had that. Maybe you did for a while, but people can lose their way, sweetheart. That doesn't mean you have to lose yours trying to find them." Dorothy slid the cookie sheet into the oven and sat across from her daughter. "There's something else I want to tell you. When your father and I were trying to have you, we lost 2 pregnancies. Each time I blamed myself, wondered what I'd done wrong, what I could have done differently." Marilyn had never heard this story. "Mom, Your father never once made me feel like it was my fault. He grieved with me, not at me. He held me when I cried, but he didn't try to fix my sadness or rush me through it. Dorothy reached across the table to squeeze Marilyn's hand. That's what love looks like when it's tested. Not promises and apologies after the damage is done. Connecting PM. The decision. Later, lying in her childhood bed with her hands on her growing belly, Marilyn thought about the day's revelations. Sophia's strength, Holly's unexpected vulnerability, her mother's quiet wisdom about what love should and shouldn't look like. Her phone buzzed with another message from Elliot. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know I ended things with Holly today. For good. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I had to tell you. Marilyn stared at the message for a long time before typing her response. Too little, too late. But I'm glad you finally did the right thing. She hesitated, then added, I hope you figure out who you want to be, Elliot. Our daughter deserves a father who knows his own mind. After sending the message, she made a decision. Tomorrow, she would meet Holly James. Not to compete with her or compare wounds, but to close that chapter of the story on her own terms. The baby kicked vigorously, as if approving of her mother's resolve. For the first time since finding those diamond earrings, Marilyn fell asleep easily, dreaming not of what she'd lost but of what she might build. 10:55 a.m. Starbucks, Union Street. Marilyn arrived 5 minutes early, choosing a corner table where she could see the entrance. She dressed carefully that morning, not to compete with Holly but to feel confident. A navy maternity dress that complemented her eyes, her grandmother's pearl earrings, her wedding ring conspicuously absent from her finger. The morning sickness that had plagued her first trimester had returned with stress, but she'd forced herself to eat toast and drink ginger tea. Her daughter needed nutrition, and Marilyn needed strength for whatever this conversation would bring. Holly arrived precisely at 11, scanning the cafe until she spotted Marilyn. She looked different than Marilyn had imagined, smaller somehow, less intimidating without the confident woman who had waved at Mrs. O'Brien from her kitchen window. Her red hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a cream sweater that made her look younger, more vulnerable. But Marilyn reminded herself that vulnerability could be performed as easily as confidence. Thank you for coming, Holly said, sliding into the chair across from her. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, Marilyn replied honestly. But I decided I wanted to look you in the eye when I said what I need to say. Holly's carefully composed expression flickered. I ordered you a decaf latte. I noticed you were drinking chamomile at your mother's house yesterday. You were watching my mother's house? Marilyn's voice was dangerously quiet. I drove by. Once. Holly's composure cracked slightly. I needed to see where you were to know that you were okay. That you were okay? Or that I wasn't coming back to reclaim what you thought you'd won? 11:10 a.m. The performance. Holly leaned forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Marilyn, I know you hate me. You have every right to hate me. But I need you to understand something. I'm not the villain here. Marilyn took a sip of her decaf latte, studying Holly over the rim of her cup. Then who is? Elliot. He pursued me for months. He told me his marriage was already over, that you two were staying together out of habit, not love. He said you didn't understand him the way I did. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him, Holly admitted. He was charming, attentive. He made me feel special. When a man tells you his wife doesn't appreciate him, when he takes you to expensive restaurants and buys you gifts and makes you feel like the most important person in his world. She trailed off, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Marilyn waited. She had learned from her mother that silence was often more powerful than words. Yesterday at his office, he told me I was just an escape, that he never loved me, that I was just a way to avoid his responsibilities. Holly's voice broke slightly. 3 months of my life, Marilyn. 3 months of believing we had a future together. And then he discarded me like I was nothing. And now you want my sympathy? Holly looked up, surprised by the steel in Marilyn's voice. I thought you might understand. We were both betrayed by him. We were both lied to. 11:25 m. The reckoning. Marilyn set down her cup with deliberate precision. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and absolutely devastating. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Holly. You came here because Elliot hurt your feelings yesterday, and now you want the pregnant wife he cheated on to comfort you? I didn't mean, you want me to bond with you over our shared victimhood, to validate your pain because my husband made you feel used? Marilyn's voice never rose, but each word landed like a carefully aimed blow. You're sitting there telling me about expensive restaurants and gifts and feeling special, as if I should feel sorry that your affair wasn't as meaningful as you hoped it would be. Holly's face had gone pale. I know how this sounds, but you know how this sounds? Marilyn leaned forward slightly. It sounds like you're more upset about being dumped than about destroying a marriage. It sounds like you're disappointed that your fairy tale romance with someone else's husband didn't have a happy ending. You don't understand. I have feelings too. I'm hurting too. You're hurting? Marilyn's composure finally cracked, just slightly, just enough to reveal the steel underneath. Let me tell you about hurting, Holly. Hurting is coming home from your prenatal appointment, excited to share that you're having a daughter, only to find out your husband spent the evening you planned to celebrate with another woman. Holly tried to interrupt, but Marilyn continued relentlessly. Hurting is realizing that while you were picking out baby names, your husband was picking out hotel rooms with his mistress. Hurting is wondering if he was thinking about you when he was making love to his wife. 11:30 a.m. The truth about choices. Hurting, Marilyn continued, is having to explain to your unborn child why daddy doesn't live with mommy anymore. It's wondering if you were so unlovable that your husband had to find someone else while you were carrying his baby. Holly's tears were flowing freely now, but Marilyn felt no sympathy. But here's the difference between us, Holly. I was an innocent victim in this situation. You were a willing participant. When you saw his wedding ring, and don't tell me you didn't notice it, you made a choice. When he told you about his pregnant wife, you made another choice. Every restaurant, every hotel room, every lie you helped him tell, those were all choices. I thought I loved him, Holly whispered. No, Marilyn said firmly. You thought you loved the fantasy. You loved the excitement, the secrecy, the feeling of being chosen. But you didn't love him, because if you had, you would have wanted what was best for him. You would have encouraged him to work on his marriage, to be the father his child deserved. Holly flinched, as if she'd been slapped. Instead, you encouraged him to abandon his responsibilities. You made it easier for him to betray the people who trusted him. That's not love, Holly. That's selfishness. 11:40 a.m. The final word. Marilyn stood up, gathering her purse with the dignity of a queen dismissing a subject. You asked me here because you wanted absolution. You wanted me to tell you that you're not responsible, that you're just another one of Elliot's victims. But I won't give you that comfort. Holly looked up at her. Mascara smudged, defenses completely dismantled. What do you want me to do? How can I make this right? You can't, Marilyn said simply. Some things can't be made right, only learned from. You can make sure you never participate in destroying someone else's family. You can look for love in places where it's actually available, not where you have to steal it. She paused, studying Holly's tear-streaked face. And maybe someday you can find someone who doesn't have to lie to other people to be with you. As Marilyn walked toward the exit, Holly called after her, her voice desperate. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't matter, but I am genuinely sorry. Marilyn turned back one last time. You're right. It doesn't matter. Apologies don't rebuild trust, Holly. They don't restore what was broken. They don't give my daughter her intact family back. But for what it's worth, she added, her voice softening just slightly, I hope you figure out who you want to be when you're not someone's secret. You deserve better than that, even if you didn't think I did. 12 p.m., walking away. Outside the coffee shop, Marilyn took a deep breath of the crisp October air. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear or sadness, but from the adrenaline of finally saying what she needed to say. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, her new friend from the support group. How did it go? Remember, you don't owe anyone forgiveness, but you do owe yourself peace. Marilyn typed back, mission accomplished, heading home now. As she drove back toward her mother's house, Marilyn felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Lightness. Not happiness exactly, but the absence of the weight she'd been carrying. She had faced her husband's mistress, looked her in the eye, and refused to be diminished by her. The baby kicked strongly, and Marilyn placed a protective hand over her belly. That's right, little girl, she said aloud. Your mama doesn't negotiate with people who don't respect boundaries, and neither will you. For the first time since this nightmare began, Marilyn felt like herself again, not the victim of Elliot's betrayal, not the broken woman who had fled in the night, but the strong person she had always been underneath the pain. Holly James could keep her regrets and her crocodile tears. Marilyn had a life to rebuild. 8:30 a.m., Monday morning damage control. Elliot arrived at Brennan Marketing Group 20 minutes early, hoping to avoid the awkward stares and whispered conversations that had followed him since Holly's dramatic appearance in his office 3 days ago. But gossip moved faster than good intentions, and he could feel the weight of his colleague's judgment before he even reached his desk. Jennifer, his assistant, greeted him with the kind of professional politeness reserved for people you're no longer sure you can trust. "Good morning, Elliot. Mr. Brennan wants to see you in his office at 9. The words hit him like a punch to the stomach. Douglas Brennan, the firm's founding partner, had been Elliot's mentor for 8 years. He'd been the one to promote Elliot to senior account manager, the one who'd trusted him with their biggest clients, the one who'd congratulated him when Marilyn announced her pregnancy. Now Elliot would have to explain why his personal life had become office entertainment. 8:45 a.m. The preparation. Elliot spent 15 minutes trying to craft an explanation that would minimize the damage. He'd violated no company policies. Technically, there was no rule against having affairs, no handbook section on public humiliation, but Brennan Marketing Group built its reputation on trust, on reliability, on being the kind of people clients wanted to work with long-term. A man who couldn't keep his marriage together while his wife was pregnant didn't exactly inspire confidence in his ability to maintain professional relationships. His computer chimed with an email from Marcus in Creative, the subject line reading simply, "Dude." Inside was a link to a local gossip blog's blind item that made Elliot's blood run cold. Which prominent Bay Area marketing exec is having a very public meltdown after his pregnant wife discovered his affair? Word is the mistress showed up at his office for a dramatic confrontation that had the whole company buzzing. We hear divorce papers are already in the works. The post had been shared 47 times. 9 a.m. The reckoning. Douglas Brennan's corner office overlooked the San Francisco Bay, its floor-to-ceiling windows usually offering a calming view of sailboats and morning fog. Today, those windows felt like prison walls. Brennan was 62, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested a lifetime of difficult conversations. He'd built his firm from nothing, and his reputation was built on the principle that character mattered more than talent. "Sit down, Elliot." His voice was calm, but Elliot had worked for him long enough to recognize the disappointment underneath. "Doug, I can explain." "Can you?" Brennan leaned back in his chair, studying Elliot like he was seeing him for the first time. "Can you explain why Sarah from accounting feels uncomfortable coming to work because she witnessed your personal drama playing out in our office? Can you explain why our biggest client called this morning asking if the rumors they're hearing about our company, culture, are true?" Elliot's mouth went dry. "Which client?" "Riverside Development, the account you've been managing for 3 years. The account that represents 30% of our annual revenue." Brennan's voice remained steady, but his eyes were ice cold. "Jim Riverside is old-fashioned, Elliot. He believes in family values and integrity. What do you think he's going to say when he finds out his account manager was cheating on his pregnant wife?" 9:15 a.m. The consequences. "I know I made mistakes in my personal life," Elliot said desperately, "but that doesn't affect my work. My professional record speaks for itself." "Does it? Because from where I'm sitting, a man who lies to his wife for months might have some trouble with honesty in other areas of his life." Brennan opened a file on his desk. "I've been reviewing your expense reports from the past quarter. Interesting how many client dinners you charged to the company credit card." Elliot's stomach dropped. He'd used the company card twice for dinners with Holly, telling himself he'd make it up somehow, that it was just temporary borrowing. "I can reimburse." "It's not about the money, Elliot. It's about the pattern. The lies, the deception, the complete lack of judgment. You brought your personal chaos into our workplace. You've compromised our professional reputation, and now I find out you've been mixing personal expenses with business accounts." Brennan stood up, moving to the window overlooking the bay. "I've known you for 8 years. I promoted you, trusted you, considered you part of the family here. But the man I knew wouldn't have done any of this." 9:30 a.m. The ultimatum. "Here's what's going to happen," Brennan continued, returning to his desk. "You're going to take a leave of absence, 30 days unpaid. You're going to get your personal life sorted out. You're going to reimburse the company for any inappropriate charges, and you're going to decide if you're the kind of person who can represent this firm with integrity." "Doug, please, I need this job. I've got divorce proceedings, child support." "You should have thought about that before you decided to have an affair." Brennan's voice was final. "If you can convince me in 30 days that you've learned from this, that you understand the difference between personal choices and professional responsibilities, we can discuss your future here. But that woman will never set foot in this office again, and your personal life will never again become our problem." Elliot nodded numbly, understanding that this was more mercy than he deserved. "And Elliot," Brennan's voice softened slightly, "I suggest you use this time to figure out what kind of father you want to be. Because right now you're not setting a very good example for that child you're about to have." 10. M. The walk of shame. Packing his personal items into a cardboard box while his colleagues pretended not to watch was one of the most humiliating experiences of Elliot's life. Jennifer helped efficiently and silently, her usual cheerful chatter replaced by professional distance. "I'll forward any urgent emails to your personal account," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Thank you," he managed. "Jennifer, I want you to know, it's okay, Elliot. You don't need to explain anything to me." But it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. Jennifer was young, ambitious, and she'd looked up to him as a mentor. Now she was learning that the successful executive she'd admired was just another man who couldn't keep his promises. As he walked toward the elevator carrying his box of defeated ambitions, Elliot caught fragments of whispered conversations, heard his wife was 6 months pregnant. Can't believe he brought her here. Poor woman, finding out like that. The elevator doors closed on his former life, leaving him alone with his reflection in the polished steel. A 46-year-old man who looked older than his years, holding a cardboard box that represented the professional reputation he'd spent 8 years building and 3 months destroying. 10:30 a.m. The empty apartment, Elliot's apartment, the home he'd shared with Marilyn, where they'd planned their future and decorated the nursery, felt like a museum of his failures. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock Marilyn's parents had given them as a wedding gift. He wandered into what was supposed to be the nursery, where a half-assembled crib sat surrounded by unopened boxes of baby clothes and toys. The walls were painted a soft yellow, gender-neutral, because they'd wanted to be surprised. Now the surprise was how thoroughly he'd ruined everything. His phone buzzed with a text from Holly. "I heard about your job. I'm sorry. If you need to talk, I'm here." He stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Holly was part of the problem, not the solution. She represented everything he'd chosen over his family, and he couldn't keep choosing it if he wanted any chance of redemption. Instead, he opened his laptop and began typing. "Dear Marilyn, I know you don't want to hear from me, and I understand why. I know I have no right to ask for anything from you after what I've done, but I need you to know that I'm trying to become the man I should have been all along. I lost my job today. I'm in counseling. I ended things with Holly permanently. None of that fixes what I broke, but I want you to know I'm taking responsibility for my choices. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect another chance. But when our daughter is born, I want to be someone she can be proud of even if her parents aren't together. I love you. I know I have no right to say that anymore, but it's true. Elliot." He read the email 3 times before hitting send, knowing it would probably go unanswered like all the others. But writing it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in months. Outside his window, San Francisco continued its daily rhythm, indifferent to his personal catastrophe. People went to work, built relationships, made choices they could live with. Elliot had 30 days to figure out how to become one of them again. 3 weeks later, 7:30 a.m., Dorothy's kitchen. The morning routine had become sacred. Marilyn sat at her mother's kitchen table, laptop open, sketching logos for her newest freelance client while Dorothy prepared fresh blueberry pancakes. The familiar sounds of home, coffee percolating, morning news humming softly, the grandfather clock chiming, had become the soundtrack to Marilyn's reconstruction. "Another client?" Dorothy asked, setting a plate of pancakes beside Marilyn's computer. "A boutique fitness studio in the Mission. The owner, Amanda, is about my age, starting over after her own divorce." Marilyn rubbed her belly, now prominently rounded at 7 months. "She wants branding that feels strong, but approachable. I think I can work with that." Since leaving Elliot, Marilyn's freelance graphic design business had unexpectedly flourished. Word of mouth traveled fast in San Francisco's small business community, and apparently, a pregnant woman rebuilding her life after betrayal was exactly the kind of underdog story potential clients wanted to support. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Coffee after your doctor's appointment today? I have news." Marilyn smiled. In 3 weeks, Sophia had become more than a friend from support group. She'd become the sister Marilyn had never had, someone who understood both the challenges of single motherhood and the unexpected liberation that could come from choosing yourself first. 9 a.m., Dr. Martinez's office. Everything looks perfect, Dr. Rebecca Martinez said, reviewing Marilyn's ultrasound images. Baby girl is measuring right on schedule, heartbeat is strong, and your blood pressure is much better than it was 3 weeks ago. Marilyn wasn't surprised. The constant stress of living with Elliot's deception, of pretending everything was fine while her instincts screamed otherwise, had been replaced by the clarity of knowing exactly where she stood. Have you thought more about your birth plan? Dr. Martinez asked gently. I know the situation with your husband is complicated. Ex-husband, Marilyn corrected automatically. The divorce papers were filed last week. And yes, I've thought about it. I want my mother in the delivery room. If Elliot wants to meet his daughter after she's born, we can arrange that through my lawyer, but I won't have him in the room while I'm vulnerable. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. It's important that you feel safe and supported during labor. Stress hormones can complicate delivery, so surrounding yourself with people who make you feel calm and strong is medically sound advice. As Marilyn left the appointment, she realized she hadn't thought about Elliot's reaction to her decision. 3 weeks ago, every choice had been filtered through worry about how he might respond. Now, her choices were filtered through what was best for her and her daughter. It was a surprisingly peaceful way to live. 11:30 a.m., coffee with revelations. Sophia was already waiting at their usual corner table when Marilyn arrived at Blue Bottle Coffee, her face glowing with the kind of excitement that suggested good news. You look like someone who's about to burst, Marilyn said, settling into her chair with the careful movements of advanced pregnancy. I got the promotion, Sophia announced, unable to contain her grin any longer. Senior Marketing Director. 30% raise, my own team, and flexible hours so I can still pick Luna up from preschool. Marilyn felt a surge of pure joy for her friend. Sophia, that's incredible. You've been working toward this for years. The best part? They told me one of the reasons they chose me was my resilience, my ability to thrive under pressure. They specifically mentioned how I've balanced single motherhood with career growth. Sophia leaned forward conspiratorially. 5 years ago, being a single mom felt like a professional liability. Now it's apparently a leadership qualification. They spent the next hour celebrating Sophia's success and planning Marilyn's growing business. Sophia had connections in the tech industry, and several startup founders were looking for branding expertise. By the time they parted ways, Marilyn had 3 potential new clients and a clearer vision for her future than she'd had in years. 2 p.m., the unexpected visitor. Marilyn was reviewing design concepts in her mother's living room when the doorbell rang. Through the window, she could see a delivery truck and a man holding an enormous bouquet of white roses, at least 3 dozen, arranged with baby's breath and tied with a silk ribbon. Dorothy answered the door while Marilyn watched from the couch, her stomach tightening with familiar dread. Delivery for Marilyn Parker, the man said cheerfully. I'll take them, Dorothy replied, her voice carefully neutral. After the delivery man left, Dorothy carried the flowers into the living room along with a small white envelope. I think we both know who these are from. Marilyn's hands trembled slightly as she opened the card. Elliot's handwriting, as familiar as her own, filled the small space. Marilyn, I know flowers can't fix what I broke, but I wanted you to know I'm thinking of you and our daughter every day. I'm getting help. I'm changing. I hope someday you can see that even if you never forgive me. Elliot. 3 dozen white roses, Marilyn said quietly. The same flowers he sent after our first fight, after our first anniversary, after every time he needed to apologize for something small. Dorothy sat down beside her daughter. And what did they mean then? That he was sorry, that he loved me, that he would do better. Marilyn looked at the extravagant bouquet, its pristine beauty somehow obscene in light of everything that had happened. But flowers were never the problem, Mom. The problem was that he kept doing things he needed to apologize for. 2:30 p.m. The response. Without hesitation, Marilyn stood up and carried the flowers to the kitchen. She found a pair of scissors in the drawer and began cutting the stems, arranging the roses in smaller bouquets that she placed in mason jars around the house. What are you doing? Dorothy asked, watching her daughter work with methodical precision. Taking what I can use and leaving the rest, Marilyn replied. These flowers are beautiful. They'll brighten the house for a few days and then they'll fade, and that will be fine. But I'm not going to let them represent something they're not. She picked up her phone and typed a simple response. Thank you for the flowers. They're lovely. Please don't send any more gifts. Our daughter and I are building a good life, and we don't need symbols of the past in it. If you truly want to change, do it for yourself and for her, not for me. After hitting send, Marilyn felt the same lightness she'd experienced after confronting Holly. The relief of saying exactly what needed to be said, without cruelty, but without compromise. 4 p.m. Planning the future. That evening, Marilyn spread her design portfolio across Dorothy's dining room table, reviewing 4 years of work and realizing how much her style had evolved. Her early pieces were technically proficient, but safe. Her recent work showed more confidence, more willingness to take creative risks. "I think I want to rent an office space," she said aloud, the idea forming as she spoke it. Dorothy looked up from her knitting, a tiny yellow sweater that was nearly finished. "Really? You could work from here as long as you need to. I know, and I'm grateful, but I think I need a space that's entirely mine, where I can meet clients and have a proper studio setup. Something that says I'm not just a freelancer working from her mother's kitchen. I'm a professional building a business." Dorothy's smile was full of pride. "Have you looked at any spaces?" "Not yet, but I will. There's a small commercial building near the mission that might have something suitable. I want to be established before the baby comes so I can hit the ground running when I'm ready to work again." As she spoke, Marilyn felt the baby kick strongly, as if approving of her mother's ambitions. The little girl who would arrive in less than 2 months would grow up seeing her mother as a business owner, a woman who built something from nothing, who chose strength over victimhood. "You know," Dorothy said thoughtfully, "your father would be so proud of you. He always said you had more grit than you knew what to do with." Marilyn touched her belly gently. "I hope she gets that from both of us." 6 p.m. The realization. Later that night, as Marilyn reviewed her bank account and business projections, she realized something that surprised her. Financially, she was going to be fine. Between her growing client base, the modest settlement from her divorce, and the child support payments that would begin after the baby was born, she would actually be more financially secure as a single mother than she'd ever been as Elliot's wife. More importantly, every dollar would be earned through her own efforts, her own talents, her own choices. She wouldn't have to wonder if the money paying for her groceries had been earned while lying to other people, or if the man supporting her was also supporting someone else. Her phone buzzed with another text from Sophia. "Luna wants to know if she can be big sister to your baby. I told her that's not exactly how it works, but she's insisting they'll be practice sisters until you give her a real sibling." Marilyn laughed out loud, the first genuine laugh she'd had in weeks. The idea of her daughter growing up with Luna as an honorary big sister, of being part of a chosen family built on love and mutual support rather than legal obligations, felt like the best possible future she could imagine. For the first time since finding those diamond earrings on her bed, Marilyn wasn't just surviving her new life, she was excited about it. 2 weeks later, 8:45 a.m., labor and delivery. The contractions had started at 3 in the morning, gentle at first, like waves lapping at a distant shore. By 8, they were crashing over Marilyn with the force of a storm surge, demanding her complete attention and stripping away everything that wasn't absolutely essential. Dorothy held her daughter's hand as they walked the maternity ward corridors, stopping every few minutes when another contraction seized Marilyn's body. At 38 weeks and 4 days, their daughter was ready to make her entrance into the world. Dr. Martinez said labor can take a while with first babies, Dorothy said gently, though Marilyn could hear the worry in her voice. "Try to stay relaxed." Marilyn managed a weak laugh between contractions. "Relaxed, right. I'll add that to my list right after figure out how to push a human being out of my body." Despite the pain, despite the fear, there was something deeply satisfying about this moment. She was exactly where she needed to be, surrounded by people who loved her, about to meet the daughter she'd been dreaming of for months. No lies, no betrayal, no wondering if the person beside her was thinking about someone else. Just truth and love, and the raw honesty of bringing new life into the world. 10:30 a.m. The unexpected arrival. Marilyn was settled in her delivery room, Dorothy reading to her from a pregnancy magazine, when a nurse knocked on the door. "Mrs. Parker? There's someone here asking about you." "Elliot Parker? He says he's the father." Marilyn's peaceful labor bubble burst. She'd known this moment would come, had discussed it with Rebecca Lawson and Dr. Martinez, but she'd hoped for more time to prepare. "What did you tell him?" Dorothy asked sharply. "That visiting privileges are up to the patient," the nurse replied diplomatically. "He's in the waiting area. He brought flowers and asked me to tell you he'll respect whatever decision you make." Marilyn closed her eyes, feeling another contraction building. She'd specifically put in her birth plan that Elliot was not welcome in the delivery room, but she hadn't considered what would happen if he simply showed up at the hospital. Tell him, she said carefully, that he can wait if he wants to, but he won't be seeing me or the baby until after she's born, and I've had time to recover. If he pushes back on that, call security. The nurse nodded and left, leaving Marilyn to deal with the emotional complication of knowing her ex-husband was somewhere in the building, waiting for news of their child. 12:15 p.m. The conversation. 3 hours later, as Marilyn's contractions intensified, Dorothy stepped out to get ice chips and returned with an expression that meant trouble. "He's still here," she said without preamble. "I ran into him in the cafeteria. He looks different." "Different how?" "Thinner. Tired. Like he hasn't been sleeping well." Dorothy sat down beside the bed. "He asked me to tell you that he's been in counseling, that he understands why you don't want to see him, but that he hoped he could be here for the birth of his daughter." Marilyn felt a surge of anger that had nothing to do with labor pains. He hoped? What about what I hope? What about what I need? "That's exactly what I told him," Dorothy said firmly. "I said this day was about you and the baby, not about his guilt or his need for redemption." He said he understood, but he's still here. He's still here. Marilyn struggled with the conflicting emotions. Part of her, the part that had loved Elliot for 7 years, felt sorry for him, waiting in an uncomfortable chair while his daughter was being born without him. But the larger part, the part that had been betrayed and lied to, refused to let his discomfort become her problem. "Mom, I need you to go tell him something for me." Dorothy nodded, pulling out her phone to take notes. "Tell him that our daughter will know her father, but she'll know him as the man he becomes, not the man he was. If he wants to be part of her life, he needs to prove he's worthy of it, not just show up and expect forgiveness because he's biologically related to her." 2:45 p.m. Active labor. As labor progressed, Marilyn found herself entering a state of focused intensity she'd never experienced before. The pain was overwhelming, but it was purposeful pain, each contraction bringing her closer to meeting her daughter. Dr. Martinez checked her progress and smiled. "You're at 8 centimeters. We're getting close." Dorothy wiped her daughter's forehead with a cool cloth. "You're doing beautifully, sweetheart. She's almost here." Marilyn gripped her mother's hand as another contraction peaked. "I want her to be strong," she gasped. "Stronger than I was. I want her to never accept less than she deserves." "She'll learn that from watching you," Dorothy said firmly. "Look what you've accomplished in 2 months. You left a situation that wasn't serving you, built a business, created a support system, made a home for both of you. That little girl is going to grow up seeing what strength looks like." 4:17 p.m. Arrival. Clara Rose Parker entered the world screaming, tiny fists waving indignantly at the bright lights and cold air. She was perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces of pure potential, with Marilyn's dark hair, and what the nurses swore was already an attitude. "She's beautiful," Dr. Martinez said, placing the baby on Marilyn's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Marilyn looked down at her daughter, really looked at her, and felt something click into place that she hadn't even known was missing. This tiny person, red-faced and furious at being evicted from her comfortable womb, was worth every moment of the pain that had brought her here. "Hello, Clara," Marilyn whispered, and the baby's crying softened at the sound of her mother's voice. "I'm your mom. I've been waiting to meet you." Dorothy was crying openly, her hand resting gently on her granddaughter's tiny head. "She's absolutely perfect, Marilyn. Look at those little fingers." For the next hour, the world consisted only of their small room, Marilyn, Dorothy, Clara, and the overwhelming love that connected them. Nurses came and went, checking vitals and filling out paperwork, but the outside world felt very far away. 5:30 p.m. The request. When Marilyn had been cleaned up and Clara had been measured, weighed, and swaddled, Dr. Martinez approached with gentle hesitation. "Marilyn, the baby's father is still in the waiting room. He's asked if he could meet her just for a few minutes. What would you like me to tell him?" Marilyn looked down at Clara, now sleeping peacefully in her arms. This perfect little person was half Elliot's genetic material, whether Marilyn liked it or not. Clara would grow up with questions about her father, and someday she would form her own relationship with him, but that relationship would be on Marilyn's terms, when Marilyn felt ready to facilitate it. "Tell him he can see her through the nursery window," Marilyn said finally, "and that he can come back tomorrow during visiting hours if he wants to hold her. But today is mine." Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. "I'll let him know." After she left, Dorothy squeezed her daughter's hand. "That was very generous of you." "No," Marilyn said, adjusting Clara's tiny knit cap. "It was strategic. I want Clara to know that her mother makes decisions based on what's best for her, not on emotion or spite. If Elliot wants to be part of her life, he'll learn to work within the boundaries I set. 6:20 p.m. Through the glass. 20 minutes later, from her hospital bed, Marilyn could see Elliot standing at the nursery window. He looked exactly as Dorothy had described. Thinner, older, worn down by the consequences of his choices. But when he saw Clara through the glass, his face transformed with wonder and love that was unmistakable even from a distance. He pressed his palm against the window, his shoulders shaking with what Marilyn realized were tears. For a moment she remembered the man she'd fallen in love with, the one who'd wanted children as much as she did, who'd talked about teaching their kids to ride bikes and helping with homework. That man might still exist somewhere inside the person who had betrayed her. Clara deserved the chance to know him, if he could become worthy of knowing her. "Look at your daddy," Marilyn whispered to Clara, who was awake and alert in her arms. "He loves you already. That's a start." She picked up her phone and sent Elliot a text. "Her name is Clara Rose Parker. She's perfect. You can visit tomorrow at 2 p.m. for 30 minutes. Come alone." A few minutes later, her phone buzzed with his response. "Thank you. She's beautiful. Thank you for this chance." Marilyn deleted the message without responding. Gratitude was fine, but it wasn't enough. If Elliot wanted to be Clara's father, he would have to prove it with actions, not words. For now, that was his problem to solve. Clara stirred in her arms, making the tiny mewing sounds that meant she was getting hungry. As Marilyn prepared to nurse her daughter for the first time, she felt a deep sense of completion that had nothing to do with Elliot or their failed marriage. She had created this perfect little person. She would raise her to be strong, kind, and uncompromising about her own worth. And Clara would grow up knowing that love was something you demonstrated, not just something you claimed to feel. That was a lesson worth learning from the very beginning. October 15th, 9:30 a.m., Parker Design Studio. The brass nameplate on the frosted glass door read Parker Design Studio, in elegant typography that Marilyn had spent weeks perfecting. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking a tree-lined street in the Mission District, illuminating a space that was equal parts professional office and creative sanctuary. Marilyn sat at her drawing table, Clara balanced on her hip, reviewing final designs for her biggest client yet, a sustainable clothing company that had specifically sought her out after seeing her work featured in San Francisco Magazine's Women Entrepreneurs to Watch issue. "What do you think, baby girl?" she asked Clara, who was now 13 months old and had opinions about everything. "Does Mama's logo capture the essence of eco-friendly fashion?" Clara babbled something that sounded remarkably like pretty, reaching for the colored pencils with the determination of someone who had inherited her mother's artistic sensibilities. At 28, Marilyn looked different than she had during her marriage. There was a confidence in her posture, a clarity in her eyes that spoke of someone who had discovered exactly who she was when stripped of everyone else's expectations. Her dark hair was shorter now, framing her face in a way that made her look both professional and approachable. The business had grown beyond her wildest expectations. What had started as emergency freelance work to pay the bills had evolved into a thriving design studio, with a waiting list of clients and a reputation for understanding brands that represented authentic values. 10 a.m., the morning routine. Sophia arrived precisely at 10, as she did every Tuesday and Thursday to watch Clara while Marilyn had client meetings. The arrangement worked perfectly. Sophia got to spend time with her honorary niece, Clara got to play with Luna, and Marilyn got uninterrupted time to focus on growing her business. "How's our little artist today?" Sophia asked, lifting Clara into her arms and spinning her around until she giggled. "She tried to redesign the Henderson logo with crayon this morning," Marilyn replied, gathering her portfolio. "I think she has potential." "Luna's in the car. We're going to the Children's Museum, then lunch at the park. Same pickup time? 3 o'clock. I should be done with the Mitchell consultation by then." Marilyn kissed Clara goodbye, marveling as she always did at how natural this felt, the easy partnership with another mother, the community of support they'd built together. As Sophia left with Clara, Marilyn's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Dinner Sunday? I'm making Clara's favorite sweet potato gnocchi." Dorothy had embraced grandmotherhood with the same fierce protectiveness she'd shown as a mother. She babysat twice a week, had Clara's schedule memorized, and had already started a college fund that she contributed to monthly. The three-generation household had worked beautifully for Clara's first year, but Marilyn was finally ready to move into her own place. a sunny two-bedroom apartment 6 blocks away that would give them independence while keeping family close. 11:30 a.m. The client meeting. Jessica Mitchell arrived with the nervous energy of someone starting over at 45. She'd recently left her corporate marketing job to launch a consulting firm for women transitioning back to work after raising children, and she needed branding that would inspire confidence in both her services and herself. "I love what you did for Sophia's company," Jessica said, spreading Marilyn's previous work across the conference table. "The way you captured her strength without making it feel intimidating. That's exactly what I need." As they worked through concepts, Marilyn found herself thinking about the irony of building a career around helping people reinvent themselves. 2 years ago, she couldn't have imagined the life she was living now. Successful, independent, surrounded by a chosen family that supported her ambitions instead of asking her to diminish them. "I want women to look at my brand and think, if she can rebuild her career, so can I," Jessica explained. Marilyn smiled. "I know exactly how to capture that." 1:00 p.m. The unexpected encounter. Marilyn was walking back from lunch when she saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench across from her building. Elliot looked different than he had a year ago. Healthier, more put together, but also somehow smaller. He wore a simple gray sweater and jeans instead of his usual expensive suits, and there was a humility in his posture that hadn't been there before. He stood when he saw her approaching, his expression careful and respectful. "Hi, Marilyn. I hope it's okay that I stopped by. I was in the neighborhood for a meeting." They'd developed a cordial co-parenting relationship over the past year. Elliot saw Clara every other Saturday for 4 hours, always at Dorothy's house, always with careful boundaries that Marilyn had established, and he had learned to respect. He'd been consistent, reliable, and appropriately grateful for the access he was given. "How was your meeting?" she asked, not unkindly but not warmly either. "Good. I'm working with a nonprofit now, helping small businesses recover from bankruptcy. It's different from what I used to do, but..." He paused, searching for the right words. "It feels more honest." Marilyn nodded. She'd heard through Clara's pediatrician, whose husband worked with Elliot's new organization, that he'd taken a significant pay cut to work in a field where his experience with failure was actually an asset. "Clara's at the museum with Sophia," she said. "You'll see her this Saturday as usual." "I know. I wasn't here to see Clara. I wanted to talk to you, actually, to thank you." 1:15 p.m. The conversation. They walked slowly toward her building, maintaining the careful distance that had characterized all their interactions since the divorce. "Thank you for what?" Marilyn asked. "For raising our daughter to be so confident and happy. For giving me the chance to know her even when I didn't deserve it. For showing me what real strength looks like." Elliot's voice was quiet, sincere. "I know this sounds strange, but I think I'm a better person now than I ever was when we were married." Marilyn studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving sentiment. She found only genuine gratitude and the kind of exhausted honesty that comes from hitting rock bottom and clawing your way back up. "I'm glad you're doing better, Elliot. Clara deserves to have a father she can be proud of. Can I ask you something? How did you forgive me enough to let me be part of her life?" Marilyn considered the question carefully. "I didn't forgive you, actually. Forgiveness would imply that what you did was acceptable under certain circumstances, and it never was. But I decided that my anger toward you didn't have to define Clara's relationship with her father." Elliot absorbed this distinction, nodding slowly. "That's incredibly generous." "It's not generous. It's practical. Clara will form her own opinions about you based on how you treat her, not on how you treated me. That's not my burden to carry anymore." They'd reached her building. Elliot paused at the entrance, looking up at the brass nameplate with something that might have been pride. "You've built something amazing here," he said. "I always knew you were talented, but I don't think I ever really supported your ambitions the way I should have." "No, you didn't," Marilyn agreed matter-of-factly. "But I support them now, and that's what matters." 2:30 p.m. Reflection. Alone in her office, Marilyn reflected on the encounter. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no moment of forgiveness or renewed understanding. Just two people who had once been married, now navigating the practicalities of shared parenthood with mutual respect and careful boundaries. It occurred to her that this was exactly how she'd hoped it would evolve. Not a fairy tale reunion, but a functional partnership focused entirely on Clara's well-being. Her phone buzzed with photos from Sophia, Clara and Luna feeding ducks at the pond, both girls covered in breadcrumbs and grinning at the camera. Clara's resemblance to Elliot was obvious in these moments of pure joy, but her personality was entirely her own, curious, determined, unafraid of getting messy in pursuit of what interested her. Marilyn saved the photos to her phone and added one to her desktop wallpaper, Clara reaching toward a duck with complete confidence that it would be friendly. Her face lit up with the fearless optimism of someone who had never been given reason to doubt her own worth. 3:00 p.m., coming home. When Sophia returned with Clara, the little girl ran straight to Marilyn's drawing table, babbling excitedly about ducks and pointing at the windows as if trying to explain where they'd been. She was perfect, as always, Sophia reported, although she did try to share her goldfish crackers with every duck in the pond. After Sophia left, Marilyn settled Clara in her playpen with a set of chunky crayons and paper, watching her daughter attack her art project with the same focused intensity she brought to everything else. This was the life they'd built together, not the one Marilyn had planned when she'd gotten married, but something entirely their own. A business that aligned with her values, friendships based on mutual support rather than social obligation, a daughter who was growing up seeing her mother as someone who created her own opportunities, rather than waiting for someone else to provide them. At 3:47 a.m. on a night that felt like a lifetime ago, Marilyn had thought her world was ending. Now she understood that it had actually been beginning. Clara held up her drawing, an explosion of purple and yellow scribbles that might have been ducks or flowers or pure abstract joy. "Beautiful baby girl," Marilyn said, and meant it completely. Outside her studio windows, San Francisco was bustling with its usual energy. People building lives, making choices, deciding who they wanted to be. Marilyn Parker was no longer waiting for someone else to choose her. She had chosen herself, and it had made all the difference. 5 years later, Clara's 5th birthday, 2 p.m., Marilyn's backyard. The backyard of Marilyn's Victorian home in No Valley was alive with the chaotic joy of a children's birthday party. 5-year-old Clara, now a miniature version of her mother with the same dark hair and determined chin, directed the placement of party decorations with the authority of someone who had inherited both artistic vision and executive leadership skills. "Mama, the butterfly banner goes there," she announced, pointing to a specific spot on the fence with the precision of a seasoned event planner. "And Luna's mom needs to move the cake table so the unicorn piñata has enough space." Marilyn watched her daughter orchestrate her own celebration and marveled at the confident little person Clara had become. She spoke her mind without apology, approached challenges with curiosity rather than fear, and had never once questioned whether she deserved to take up space in the world. Sophia was arranging party favors on a nearby table, her 8-year-old daughter Luna helping Clara string lights between the trees. The two girls had grown up as honorary sisters, creating the kind of chosen family bond that ran deeper than many biological relationships. "She's incredible," said Rebecca Lawson, Marilyn's former divorce attorney who had since become a close friend. "Look at that confidence. She knows exactly what she wants and isn't afraid to ask for it." "She's never seen her mother accept less than she deserved," Marilyn replied, adjusting Clara's birthday crown. "Children learn more from what they witness than what they're told." 2:30 p.m. The unexpected guest. The doorbell rang just as Marilyn was lighting the birthday candles. Through the front window, she could see Elliot standing on her porch, holding a carefully wrapped gift and looking uncertain about whether he should be there. Over the past 5 years, their co-parenting relationship had evolved into something resembling genuine respect. Elliot saw Clara every other weekend and alternating holidays, always punctual, always respectful of boundaries, never asking for more than he was given. He'd remarried 2 years ago, a kindergarten teacher named Amy who was kind to Clara and understood that Elliot came with a complicated history. "Daddy!" Clara shrieked, launching herself into his arms with the pure joy of a child who had never doubted her father's love, even if she understood that her parents' relationship was permanently concluded. "Happy birthday, princess," Elliot said, spinning her around before setting her down. "I brought you something special." Clara tore into the gift with the focused enthusiasm she brought to everything, revealing a deluxe art set with professional quality colored pencils, watercolors, and drawing paper. "For your art studio," Elliot explained, glancing at Marilyn for approval. "Your mom mentioned you've been wanting to try watercolors." Marilyn nodded her thanks. In 5 years, Elliot had learned to consult her about gifts, to respect her rules about sugar and screen time, to support Clara's interests without trying to buy her affection. It wasn't the fairy tale reconciliation some people expected, but it was something more valuable, a functional partnership focused entirely on their daughter's well-being. 3 p.m., Community. As the party continued, Marilyn surveyed the scene with deep satisfaction. Her backyard was filled with people who had chosen to be there, not out of social obligation or family duty, but because they genuinely cared about Clara and wanted to celebrate her. Dorothy sat in a lawn chair, holding court with several other grandmothers from the neighborhood. At 71, she had embraced her role as Clara's primary grandmother, while maintaining her own active social life and volunteer commitments. Dr. Martinez was there with her own children, having transitioned from Marilyn's obstetrician to family friend over the years. Jessica Mitchell, now a successful consultant whose business had tripled since Marilyn designed her brand, was helping serve cake. Several other clients had become friends, creating a network of professional women who supported each other's businesses and families. "You know what strikes me about this party?" Rebecca said, joining Marilyn by the punch bowl. "Everyone here has a story. Everyone here has overcome something to be where they are." Marilyn looked around and realized Rebecca was right. Sophia had built a successful marketing career as a single mother. Jessica had reinvented herself professionally after divorce. Dr. Martinez had started her practice after overcoming a serious illness. Dorothy had thrived after widowhood. "We're not just celebrating Clara's birthday," Marilyn said. "We're celebrating what it looks like when people refuse to be defined by the worst thing that happened to them." 3:30 p.m. The toast. As the party began to wind down, Dorothy stood up and tapped her juice glass with a plastic fork, calling for attention. "I want to say something about this beautiful little girl we're celebrating today," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had lived long enough to recognize true strength when she saw it. "Clara Rose Parker, you are growing up in a house where love is demonstrated, not just declared, where boundaries are respected, where truth is valued over comfort, and where your mother shows you every day what it looks like to build a life on your own terms." The adults in the backyard grew quiet, recognizing the deeper significance of Dorothy's words. "You will never wonder whether you deserve better treatment, because you've never seen your mother accept less. You will never question your own worth because you've watched the woman who created you choose herself and her values over anything that tried to diminish them." Dorothy's eyes found Marilyn's across the yard. That is the greatest gift any mother can give her daughter, the example of a woman who knows her own value and refuses to negotiate it away. 4:00 p.m. The legacy. Later, after the guests had gone home and Clara was napping in her art supply scattered room, Marilyn and Dorothy cleaned up the backyard in comfortable silence. "Do you think she understands?" Marilyn asked, folding tablecloths and stacking paper plates. "That her family looks different than other families? She understands that her family is built on love and choice rather than obligation," Dorothy replied. "She understands that the adults in her life respect each other even when they don't live together. She understands that her mother is someone who creates solutions rather than accepting problems." Marilyn found herself thinking about that night 5 years ago when she'd discovered Elliot's betrayal. The woman who had placed those diamond earrings on the bed and walked away had no idea she was walking toward the life she was meant to live. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed? If I'd tried to work it out with Elliot?" Dorothy paused in her cleaning, considering the question seriously. "I think you would have taught Clara that betrayal was acceptable if the person apologized nicely enough, that her dreams should come second to keeping peace. That love meant compromising your values to make someone else comfortable." She looked at her daughter with the fierce pride of someone who had watched her child transform trauma into wisdom. "Instead, you taught her that love means choosing someone who enhances your life rather than complicates it. That forgiveness doesn't require forgetting boundaries. That she can build whatever life she wants regardless of what anyone else thinks she should accept." Sunset. The choice. As the sun set over San Francisco, painting the sky in shades of gold and possibility, Marilyn stood in her kitchen preparing dinner while Clara drew pictures at the table. The evening routine was peaceful, predictable in the best way. Bath time, story time, prayers, and the quiet satisfaction of another day well lived. Clara held up her latest artwork, a family portrait featuring herself, Marilyn, Dorothy, and what appeared to be a rainbow-colored dog. "Are we getting a dog?" Marilyn asked, laughing. "Maybe," Clara said with the confident optimism of someone who had learned that good things happen to people who asked for what they wanted. "I think a purple dog would be perfect for our family." Marilyn looked at the drawing and saw not just childish whimsy, but evidence of a little girl who believed her desires mattered, who trusted that her voice would be heard, who had never been given reason to doubt her own importance. 5 years ago, Elliot had forced her to choose between accepting betrayal and embracing uncertainty. She had chosen uncertainty, and it had led her to this. A life built on authenticity rather than compromise, surrounded by people who enhanced rather than diminished her, raising a daughter who would never question her own worth. "You know what, baby girl?" Marilyn said, pulling Clara into her lap. "I think a purple dog sounds perfect too." Outside their kitchen window, the city sparkled with the lights of 800,000 other people making their own choices, building their own lives, deciding who they wanted to be. Some of them were choosing to accept less than they deserved, but not everyone, and certainly not Marilyn Parker. She had chosen herself, and it had made all the difference. The end. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from anything that requires you to betray your own values. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children is the example of a parent who chose dignity over desperation, authenticity over acceptance, and their own worth over someone else's comfort. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like to help me out, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next stories. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.